So you want to know how a movie makes $1 billion? Well, first you need to know that there are only 50 movies to ever make $1 billion in the box office, and only 6 movies out of that 50 to make over $2 billion. So hearing that makes it sound like it's not an easy thing to do, right? Well, I think I might have perfected the formula to figuring out what makes $1 billion movie that Hollywood has been trying to figure out for years. If we look at all 50 of these movies and what they have in common, 34 out of 50 of these movies are either sequels or prequels. 9 of them have been animated, 5 of them have been retelling of old movies, mainly from Disney. 47 out of 50 of these movies have been produced or come from big movie franchises. But the most shocking number out of all of these is that only 3 out of 50 movies have been original stories, meaning that they aren't already built off of big franchises like Marvel or Disney, or hadn't been reimagined movies, but movies that were new and fresh. And 2 of them would go on to be big franchises that would garner many movie sequels, and those movie sequels would also go on to make billions of dollars as well. And the third one is like Titanic, which you might not consider an original idea because it is based off of a big historical event, but it changed the idea of Titanic enough to be its own original thing, and Titanic is just kind of the backdrop to the story they're telling. So we can see that to be a successful movie, the majority of the time you need to already be from a successful movie franchise or a big brand, which shows that nepotism even exists in cinema. But even though franchise movies are the most successful ones, does it mean that they're necessarily the best ones? Most likely not, because in any form of art, the most popular art isn't always the best one. For example, if you ask a music fan if Taylor Swift is the best music artist in the world, they would most likely say no. So if we translate that to movies, that means most of the big movies are not necessarily the best movies ever made. If we look at a generic list like IMDb's top 250 movies of all time, a majority of the top 50 billion-dollar movies aren't even on this list. And most of the time, some of the best movies ever made, or some of the most critically acclaimed movies, don't even reach around $1 billion. Like if you look at The Godfather, obviously it was made at a different time. This is one of the most influential, most popular films that if you ask anyone have they heard of The Godfather or if they've ever watched The Godfather, they're probably going to say yes. And some of the billion-dollar movies that are critically acclaimed are very polarizing in the fan base. Star Wars movies. So if the billion-dollar movies aren't the best movies, then why are people going to watch them in the box office? Obviously, we know that they're big brands. So most of the time, if billion-dollar movies are not critically acclaimed, and some of them are considered polarizing, like recently before Avatar 2 came out, people were making fun of Avatar on how it had no influence and how no one remembered the main character. Or for another example, Spider-Man No Way Home, where a lot of people say it looks awful, the green screen looks pretty bad, and the CGI doesn't look too good when you're not in a movie theater and you look back at it. Because it was shot during COVID and there was a lot of issues that they had. So if these billion-dollar movies have all these issues, what makes people want to go see them? Well, most of the time, they have this little thing called FOMO. Now, if you don't know what FOMO stands for, it means the fear of missing out, which is a popular thing when selling anything. It's used in clothing brand, it's used in music, it's used in video games, it's used in anything when you have to market or sell something. And how they use FOMO in movies is like how they used it in Avengers Endgame. And how they use FOMO in Avengers Endgame is that if you didn't go watch it as soon as possible, you might get spoiled because everyone is going to be talking about it and you're going to be missing out. So you have to go see what happens so you can be with the in crowd and how everyone else is talking about it. So you don't want to be the outsider that didn't go watch Avengers Endgame while everyone else is going watching Avengers Endgame. So you got to get your ticket as soon as possible, because what happens if you miss out and your friends are talking about it, your family's talking about it, but you're the only one who hasn't seen it? You don't want to be that person, do you? And that's how they use it for a lot of these movies. And obviously, this doesn't work for a lot of other movies that aren't part of big franchises, because you can only work with this when it comes to like Harry Potter and its last movie. You have to go watch that last Harry Potter movie. You have to watch the Spider-Man all come back. You have to watch Avatar because it's amazing graphics and 3D imaging. So FOMO has been used for decades. And we even saw this decades ago with Star Wars, when they hadn't released a movie for a while and they announced The Phantom Menace Episode 1. And people were crazy hype because, these movies are beloved. It hadn't had a movie in a while. So anyone who likes Star Wars, or anyone who knew of Star Wars, which was a majority of the world, was like, we have to go watch The Phantom Menace because it's Star Wars, it's Max. What happens if everyone spoils it for us and we don't get to see the new Star Wars? We're going to get spoiled. So it resulted in crazy FOMO for everyone to go watch this movie, and it made $1 billion in the 2000s. So it created a lot of FOMO for The Phantom Menace for everyone to go see it, which made $1 billion. and making $1 billion in the 2000s is still kind of crazy because obviously inflation nowadays, it's way easier to make $1 billion movie because the prices are crazy, but back in the day it's way harder to make that type of money. So that just shows you how many people were willing to see the Phantom Menace. And then Star Wars did it again with the sequels. So obviously FOMO is a very big thing when making $1 billion movie. So majority of the time, if you don't have the FOMO factor, the movie won't make you $1 billion and it won't put people in those seats. And the next big thing that makes these movies so successful is a term that is often used by Mr. Sunday Movies, a great YouTuber, go watch him, who calls it the 3-quadrant factor. What a 3-quadrant factor means is that a movie that is just purely action is only one quadrant. And since the only quadrant they have is purely action, the audience will only be action fans that go on to see that movie. Which means no matter how good this action movie is, it will eventually reach a peak because there's only so many action fans in the world to go see it. But if we bump it up to 2 quadrants of action and we have a big romance like a Bonnie and Clyde type of story, we can now get action fans and romance fans to watch the movie. Even though we might not get all of the action fans to go and watch this movie, we will also get the romance fans that will make up the difference and even help us reach even higher numbers. And let's say they perfect the action and the romance and they both peak, that peak will be higher than it just being an action movie. So if you ever wonder why action movies love to throw a romance story in the story, that's one of the big reasons why. But then there are movies that have 3 quadrants. What if we had an action movie with a romance story and the main character is Batman? Now we have reached 3 quadrants. We are going to have action fans to watch this movie, we're going to have romance fans to watch this movie, and we're going to have Batman fans and most likely comic book fans to watch our movie. And when you present a movie like that, we might have a hit on our hands. Now let's take $1 billion movie to see if it has these 3 quadrants. Let's start off one of the biggest movies, Avatar. It's already a sci-fi movie, so it already has its sci-fi fans. Next, it has a romance between our 2 main characters, so we got the romance fans. And the third one is a very unique quadrant that will never be seen again. It was a technical marvel by using 3D glasses. So everyone wanted to try these 3D movies out, and the movie that most people recommended to try 3D glasses and try 3D movies for was Avatar, which made a lot of people who just wanted to try 3D out to watch this movie. And we'll never see this quadrant again because in case you guys don't know, 3D is not that big of a deal anymore. Next, let's try this with another $1 billion movie like Barbie. Barbie already had its Barbie fans, which is already a very huge fan base, so that's its first quadrant. The second quadrant was that the marketing was amazing. People online were flooded with memes like Barbieheimer, so it got its boost off of people doing a double feature of Oppenheimer and Barbie, so it got some of its Oppenheimer fans, and it got a lot of people who were into memes to go watch this movie. The third quadrant was that it had a star-studded cast. So if you're a big fan of big celebrities like Margot Robbie, like Michael Cera, like all the dozens of big actors in the movie, and more importantly, they had the Ryan Gosling fan base in this movie, which is a big male fan base which Barbie needed, which at the time Ryan Gosling's fan base was at an all-time high. And this 3-quadrant rule works for most of the $1 billion movies, and if you just apply this 3-quadrant rule, most of the $1 billion movies have this 3-quadrant rule, and is a big reason to why they're so successful, because they're reaching multiple audiences and combining them together to make this big movie that all different types of people are coming to watch, instead of just getting one select group of people to watch their movie. So let's take all of these ideas and let's do a fun activity like we're back in school. I will make my own $1 billion movie right in front of you by following the formula I presented to you throughout the video. And you should try this and typing down in the comments your $1 billion pitch or your $1 billion movie idea in the comments down below. But I will go first. I will take a big brand like Pokemon that hasn't had a big faithful movie in a while and make it live action because most of the big movies are, besides a select few. We'll cast a big actor like Tom Holland to play our Ash Ketchum, and we'll cast Timothée Chalamet as Gary for his rival. And we'll also have a love interest for Ash Ketchum, who can be Misty or Serena, it doesn't really matter who. We'll go with Misty because she is the more popular one, and she will also be played by another big actor. Then we'll have Ash face off against gym leaders like Brock, played by another big actor or a notable actor, or maybe an actor that has a beloved fan base. Make sure the movie is filmed on real locations so that we can have this adventurous feel to this movie. And we'll make sure our main characters go on some adventures, but how the movie ends is that our main character Ash goes up against Gary, which we have been building up for the whole entire movie, and has an intense battle with Ash Ketchum, and Ash ultimately wins the battle with like power friendship, or maybe a skill he learned through tough battles, or maybe Ash just loses like he always does, and it's a close fight like most of the fights he loses. And then they say we'll fight next time in the next movie that will come out, and then at the end of the movie we see Red, the trainer from the Pokemon video games, walk up to Ash and say, "Hey, keep up your head, kid. I was like you once, but hopefully I'll see you at the top one day, kid." Cut to black, credits roll, and for good measure, let's get like a big director to make sure we get some extra fans to come watch this movie. Let's get Steven Spielberg, because he already did Ready Player One, so he's willing to do anything at this point. And finally, the final piece to make this movie $1 billion. This is obviously the most ultimate piece. If you need to make $1 billion, make sure to get this actor for a good measure. We'll put Zoe Saldana as Ash's mother for a couple of scenes, since she's in every billion-dollar movie. So that's my $1 billion movie. Send it to Warner Bros. Or whoever owns the Pokemon film rights, and let's have it shipped. I'll be in their office negotiating this movie. So Warner Bros., hit me up in the email. I'll come out and fly to help you make this movie. But all jokes aside, even though I laid out what makes $1 billion movie, it's no secret that some of these movie studios right now have been trying to do this formula over the recent years by creating these content factories, trying to produce the next big movie that they end up creating a dozen misses along the way. For example, look at Barbie. It was a huge hit, made $1 billion, and is one of the top 50 highest made movies of all time. But at the same time, in that same year and the year past, Warner Bros. Was on a huge losing streak and making a lot of misses and a lot of movies that underperformed and tanked in the box office. So even though movie studios are trying to create these massive hits, most of the time it's just better to build up these big brands from the ground up. Like, look at Marvel. They didn't start as a $1 billion movie making company. They made some bad movies in the 90s and the 80s, and some bad movies in the 2000s as well. And then they started making actual movies that people liked, like Iron Man, like a Captain America, like a Hulk, and like all the movies before the Avengers that made people actually want to go see Marvel movies, until they released the Avengers, the movie that everyone was hyped for, and they reached $1 billion, and that hype carried on for their whole entire MCU universe, where they continued to make other $1 billion movies. So it's not like they just struck gold on their first hit. They had to build this up. And that goes for a lot of other movie studios and a lot of other movie companies that are on this list. Same thing with Star Wars. The original trilogy were beloved classics with amazing world building and production at the time, and were hugely critically acclaimed and critically loved, and were also loved by the fans at the time. So when the sequels and prequels were made, they were huge successes because they were built off of the backs of masterpieces. And that goes for a lot of other brands like Pixar that had made so many great movies, so where they can make big massive hits like Toy Story 3 and Toy Story 4. Even though those are the biggest movies that they've made, Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 2 were amazing films that helped these movies that aren't as good, in my personal opinion, as the original ones. The masterpieces that they made beforehand helped these movies garner such big audiences and such big money. Same thing with Disney when they made Frozen 2. The reason Frozen 2 was so big was because they had a hit with Frozen 1. Frozen 2 was just a massive hit because they made an actual good movie that people loved, and then made a sequel to that no, I don't know if people really love Frozen 2 as much as they love Frozen 1. I'm not in the Frozen Reddit really analyzing what the fans really like about Frozen 2. But ultimately, even though I talked a lot about how a movie reaches $1 billion, you as the consumer of movies should never care how much a movie makes, just as long as you enjoyed the movie and you thought the movie was good. These numbers should never add or detract from a movie, because a movie is just art. If you enjoy the art, then you like the art. There's nothing that should sway you from what good art is, especially when it's numbers that will never benefit you. You're not the company working at these studios, so you should never care how much a movie makes. This video was just here to dive into what makes $1 billion movies, and most of the time when I talk about movies, I never talk about the numbers unless it's important to bring up. And if you want to hear me talk about actual good movies and movies that are amazing art masterpieces, go watch my other videos. I talk constantly about how good some of these characters are in movies. So if you want to hear me talk about actual good movies without the numbers, go watch my other videos, and don't forget to subscribe, because 99% of the people who watch me aren't subscribed. So don't be that 99%, be that 1%. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope to see you guys next time. Later, hater. Peace.